You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Skills World Live. It's great to have you back. And a massive thanks for listening to the only community radio show connecting the world of FE. Don't worry if you're already displaying the early signs of cabin fever. Look on the friendly Skills World Live team as your fourth emergency service. We're here to spread some kindness around by sharing on air the experiences that are abound in this wonderful skills sector of ours. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to the show yet, then just head over to your favourite podcasting site. It's dead easy. Sites like Spotify, Spreaker and iTunes all carry the show. And all you need to do is hit on the Skills World icon and subscribe. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Tom Bewick, where I will provide all the daily updates of the guests and the issues coming up on this show. And talking of guests, we've got a great lineup of sector leaders on tonight's programme. We'll be discussing this idea of the new normal. That's right, folks. Just like in the Twilight Zone, even if some semblance of normality eventually resumes, don't think for a minute that Planet Skills will ever look quite the same again. And who better to talk to me about those challenges than the boss of the Association of Colleges, David Hughes, and that stalwart of a former senior civil servant in Sanctuary Buildings, Susan Pember. Join me for a chat with not one awarding body boss, but two, as tonight we go all futuristic and debate what the next academic year, starting this September, could look like. But first, let's find out what's making the news headlines in your skills world this evening. Officials at the Education Skills Funding Agency have confirmed with the post-16 skills sector that the national minimum wage requirement for a furloughed apprentice applies only to the training hours during the furlough period. In practice, this means that depending on the age of the apprentice and the number of usual contracted hours, the employer may be liable to top up any furloughed wages that fall below the relevant legal national minimum wage. The clarification comes after the issue was first raised by sector representatives at the start of the government's job retention scheme, in which employers can furlough workers claiming back 80% of their wage costs up to a cap of £2,500. In other news, the Welsh Assembly Minister with responsibility for education in Wales, Kirsty Williams, has told Skills World Live that FE colleges will be able to open again in Wales if the devolved government's 5 principles are met. The Minister also said that she felt the further education system in Wales was well placed to emerge from the coronavirus crisis because of the investment the Welsh Government had already made in a new digital platform called Hub. You can listen to an extended interview with the Minister about her plans for Welsh further education on Thursday's episode of the programme. And finally, a subject leader for product design, David Horwood, has created over 50 face masks to supply the National Health Service with vital personal protective equipment. Working in collaboration with 3D Crowd UK, Horwood created the masks using the college's 2 state-of-the-art 3D printers. Horwood created the masks as part of a group of volunteers working tirelessly around the country to make PPE for the nation's NHS. That's all your Skills World News from fenews.co.uk. Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Bewick, @FENews. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111.
closer to midnight. I try to get closer to you. Drinking courage from my red cup now. I will soon make a move. Ooh, I can taste it. The bittersweetness of taking a shot. A risk worth taking. If it's a shot of love, baby, I adore you. Maybe I adore you. Yeah, I'm feeling high, I'm up on cloud nine. Baby, I adore you. I try to focus on breathing. My heart is skipping a beat. Your lips against a red cup makes me lose my mind completely. Ooh, I can taste it. The bittersweetness of taking a shot. A risk worth taking if it's a shot of love. Baby, I adore you. Maybe I adore you. Yeah, I'm feeling high, I'm up on cloud nine. Baby, I adore you. Trying my best not to lose control. I want you, that's all I know. Trying my best not to lose control. 'Cause I adore you, adore you. Trying my best not to lose control. I want you, that's all I know. Trying my best not to lose control. 'Cause I adore you. Baby, I adore you. Maybe I adore you. Yeah, I'm feeling high, I'm up on cloud nine. Baby, I adore you. Trying my best not to lose control. I want you, that's all I know. Trying my best not to lose control. 'Cause I adore you, adore you.
Adore You. That's Wake Up with What 3RS. Another one of those tracks available at epidemicsound.com, our independent music website of choice. Now, tonight's big debate is on the theme of how do we prepare for September's new normal. That's right, folks. It's only fair to say that when we first discovered that the country would have to go into lockdown, that perhaps after just a few weeks, things would resume pretty much where they had left off. I liken the feeling to a light switch moment. For parts of our economy, the lights were turned off very quickly. Bars and restaurants were told to shut down, and office workers and non-essential employees were ordered to work from home. Perhaps mistakenly, I thought at the beginning of this crisis that at some point the economic and social light bulbs that power our society would just be instantly switched back on. Instead, as we enter the 7th week of lockdown and we look abroad to other countries that have only tentatively begun to open up their societies, we now know that resuming any sort of normality is going to feel more like the actions of a dimmer switch, only slowly getting brighter as we learn to coexist and live alongside the coronavirus. Although the government is still to announce the details of how it will lift the current restrictions, one thing is already becoming clear. Ministers have signalled that there will have to be a phased return to life before we get back to anything resembling normal. Some sectors of the economy will be allowed to open before others, and even where business resumes, we can expect to see significant social distancing measures to continue. All this, of course, will impact hugely on further education. By definition, we are a people-focused skills system. Our teachers transmit knowledge to the next generation, and young people themselves love to socialise as part of their studies. In other words, FE is the perfect breeding ground for the virus to take hold and potentially unleash a second deadly wave in our communities. No wonder then that sector leaders are already talking about the new normal and the fact that the only certainty we can plan, with any certainty, about the next academic year is that there will be, well, huge uncertainty. We've already seen the effect in play only this week when our universities were granted a cash flow advance of £2.6 billion by the Student Loans Company for the fees they are expected to charge. But with massive concerns about international students in both HE and FE, as well as the broader impact on college enrolments in the next academic year, you can see why policymakers and sector leaders will be getting concerned. After this short musical interlude, I'll be talking to one man who has been at the epicentre of the epidemic, helping his members steer a course away from those rocky coronavirus shores. Stay tuned, folks. David Hughes of the Association of Colleges is coming up next.
I saw a line when you passed me by. The reason why I shine, you're the reason why. I thought I caught your eyes, but love is blind. I thought I saw you smile.
Thomas Skeedelberg and the reason why I shine. Now, another quick reminder that there'll be no usual Skills World Live show with guests on Friday the 8th of May here in the UK because it is a public holiday. Even if it is from the confines of people's homes, the nation will be celebrating, of course, those Victory in Europe commemorations. However, to get the mood off to a party atmosphere for the bank holiday weekend, I will be swapping my alter ego on Friday with DJ Van Allen by providing a 1-hour continuous mix some of the best tunes from epidemicsound.com so far. Don't miss that if you like to get your lockdown weekend off to an uplifting and energetic start. Now, joining me on the line, connecting the world of FE, is David Hughes, the boss, Association of Colleges. Welcome, David.
Hi, Tom. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you. How's things in your part of the world?
Well, it's pretty good, actually. I got an hour of gardening in at the end of the day,
Wow.
and I'm just sitting here with a beer looking out on the garden, which looks all green and lovely. So it can't be bad.
Sounds very pleasant. I might join you after I get out of this man cave in Sussex where I'm broadcasting this live community radio show. However, right, you wrote a very open and revealing online blog recently about the impact on you personally of being a leader in the sector. I mean, here's a brief passage, and I'll quote. Often it feels like a deluge of questions, ideas, proposals to check and communications to consider, respond to and digest, all being immediate and all high priority. I think there'll be a lot of people listening to this, David, who will instantly identify with that feeling. Tell us more about what goes through your mind when you power up your laptop each day.
Well, I think it's like Groundhog Day, where every day feels the same for 7 weeks, and because you're not going anywhere, and every day is just really hard. Yeah. And it's hard because, we like you, I run a membership body, and it's fantastic. We've got members asking questions every day. We're working with government to try and influence them. We're trying to get them to answer the questions, and we're trying to provide some sense of hope and optimism and a way forward. And yet the whole world is in virtual meltdown. And I think that column I wrote for the CS was really, it was heartfelt, and it was very honest, and it was very open. So, be pleased if people read it. The response I got was tremendous.
It was great, wasn't it? I think it certainly came across that way, and I think people really welcome that sort of openness from leaders. I mean, we know in sort of past crises, there's always been that, particularly in Britain, that sort of sense. You've got to be very stoic and stiff upper lip. But I thought that was a very open and revealing piece. Now, let's talk about the policy response you've had to lead since the pandemic began. I mean, by definition, the most important part of the college is the learner and also, of course, the staff. But if these places are in effect forced to shut down, then income falls. I mean, I know they're obviously open for some of the most vulnerable students. But you were straight out the traps making this point to government. I mean, do you think, though, that colleges have really been privileged during this crisis? I mean, your grant funding was guaranteed early on, and like other organisations in the economy, your members can also access some of the Treasury schemes as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, we think that about 60% of the funding for next year is fairly secure. That's the 16 to 19 study programmes and the adult education budget, leaving 40%. That's not a bad position compared to lots of other sectors, but it's not easy. Colleges will lose about 150 million in this term, since the crisis started. That's about 2% of annual turnover. So again, it's not horrific, but we know that they've had 10 years of neglect where financially the sector is pretty weak, really, and therefore what the crisis has done is put them in a weaker position. Yeah. And lots of them are struggling to think through, well, what can I do now? Do I need to make redundancies? Do I need to restructure? Do I need to downsize? What's going to happen to apprenticeships? So it's not, I certainly wouldn't say it's the worst position to be in. And a lot of ITPs, listening, independent training providers listening, charities, lots of other organisations have got it a lot worse. Sure. But it's not easy. And it's certainly not.
I mean, how will colleges, though, avoid the dreaded double funding situation? I mean, do you not fear stories on the front page of the sector press in 12 months' time after some big ESFA or HMRC audit exercise has uncovered a situation, potentially, where a college could have to pay back millions? I mean, under the current insolvency regime, that could mean them going bust.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, we've just surveyed our members. The survey's coming out tomorrow, actually. But here we go. Here's a sneak preview of part of it.
Oh, very good.
75% of colleges are using the furlough scheme, the job retention scheme. Mostly, about something like 2/3 are using it for less than 40 members of staff. So we're not talking millions for them. And there are a few who are going into it in a bigger way, and it reflects the kind of very commercial income they've got. And Tom, and I know that colleges are very cautious, and what they'll be doing with their finance directors is making sure that they're not doing anything dodgy and making sure there isn't that double funding. So I don't think that's a problem.
Right.
I think the bigger problem for me is how they have the capacity in the autumn to be able to deliver to the extra young people and the extra adults who will need their services. That's the bit that's worrying me most.
Right. Let's turn now to the new normal, theme of tonight's big debate. What, from your perspective, does this new normal actually mean for colleges? So thinking about from September, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tremendous thing colleges have done is they've moved online very, very quickly. And I'm sure some of that isn't the best online possible because it's been done so quickly. But some of it I've seen, virtually seen, is just fantastic. And I think there's some really good innovation going on. We've got a working group going on looking at reopening. And one of the subgroups is looking at how do you bring that online learning and the pedagogy and if you like, the learning that's gone on over the last 7 weeks, how do you bring that into the new normal? How do you make a blended approach a virtue, not a problem? So how do we and it might help with opening, phased opening, mightn't it? We might have some students in for part of the week, others the other part of the week, and then some blended learning to help them. And so blended learning, much greater use of online pedagogy, really thinking through how you keep young people motivated. I think we're pushing the government for flexibilities to say, well, what about more short courses for adults who might have transferable skills and who can move from one sector to another? How do you get young people in college who want a job or an apprenticeship, but there aren't any, but actually they might be able to do purposeful, useful sort of modular type learning.
Yeah.
So as soon as that job comes, they're ready for it and they can carry on learning in an apprenticeship once they're in the job. So I think much more flexibility and much more focus on the individual, I think, will be really powerful.
Okay, fine. I've just literally got a minute just to ask you about the sort of relationship between FE and higher education. I mean, I know you're always careful not to sort of stoke up tensions between the two halves of the tertiary education system, but do you not think this crisis has really demonstrated more than ever that the universities have an extremely privileged status when it comes to getting what they want and always seem to be at the front of the queue, don't they, when it comes to ministerial attention?
Well, I think that has been true, Tom. But look, the bid by Universities UK for £2.5 billion was basically flatly rejected by the government this week. And all they've got is some cash flow support, which is not unhelpful, but they've got no new money. What I think is much more interesting is the restructuring that could happen at a local level where some universities might be getting into trouble, where college and university might work together to be able to think through what the college might be better at, what they can deliver, how that can work more effectively. So I'm really quite excited about the HE-FE or university-college relationships.
Sure.
I'm very keen to kind of improve them for the labour market, for employers and for the people who want to benefit from that learning.
Yeah, David, pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for coming on Skills World Live this evening. I'll let you get back to your beer and your garden. It sounds absolutely delightful.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Take care. Bye.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. That's David Hughes there, boss of the Association of Colleges. Now, I've told you before on this show that there are several dog walkers that have contacted me to say they regularly tune in while running out their canine friends. Skills World Live, with our mix of chat and uplifting house tunes, it seems, is even becoming the playback of choice for those undertaking their daily exercise routines. But imagine how taken aback I was earlier today when I received an email from one of the high-ups working in the country's qualifications regulator, Ofqual. She told me that she'd had a dream about the show last night. That's right, folks, a dream. Apparently, though, the dream ended in real disappointment. I was unable to play, this is in her dream, a request for the Billy Bragg song on the show. Probably not the first time I've let down Ofqual either. Well, I'm really sorry about that, but routine listeners to this show will know that we don't have a licence to play top 40 chart toppers. But the editor's budget, Kelly Amara's budget, does stretch to supporting independent music and artists, like this one. Thomas Skiedelberg again, it's a double act. Do you like this artist on Skills World Live? Enjoy. So to continue tonight's big debate, I'll be introducing tonight's two phone guests very, very shortly. Both were instrumental in the publication of a report last month that called on policymakers and funders to plan for a very different September in the post-16 sector. The report, commissioned by the National Campaign for Learning, warned that from September, the economy could be 15% smaller and unemployment 1.5 million higher. The report's authors also warn the government to act now and not wait for the planned outcome of the autumn comprehensive spending review. Joining me on the line to continue tonight's big debate is one of the report's authors, Dr. Susan Pember from Holex, and David Gallagher, the chief executive at the awarding body NCFE. Good evening to you both.
Evening.
Hello, Tom.
Hello there. So let's start with you first. In the report, you clearly warn your former colleagues at the Department for Education to act now. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, it's actually only sort of 17 weeks till September. And, if all the lockdown finishes by then, or even if we're in like the fifth phase, there will be all these young people and adults needing something to happen, and government needs to have something ready for them in September. So with young people, those who are now 16, the GCSEs came to an end quite abruptly. They didn't have to do the exams. They've been sitting around. 40% of them will get good GCSE grades. 30% probably do not that well. So therefore, for coming to September, we need something for them. And it's no good thinking that the existing programmes will suit, because they won't. They'll be a different type of individual. They've had some freedoms, they've done a bit online, but they will be many more of them. And that's why government needs to act now.
And when you say act now, I mean, David Hughes, just before the break there, was talking about obviously the fall in income that colleges, like all providers in the post-16 sector, are experiencing. I mean, is it cash? Is it programmatic? Is it new things? What is it?
Tom, it's both, really.
Yeah.
So first of all, many young people would have thought they were going to get an apprenticeship, so they're going to be disappointed. So they're going to come into learning. They're going to come into a new sort of sixth form or a sixth form college or a college. They're going to come in to do something, but their hearts are still probably in employment. So there needs to be a new offer so that these young people can come in, do something really meaningful, something very intensive to make up for the education that they've lost. So it needs to be a new programme of learning, and that needs to be funded. And the way that colleges are funded at the moment and schools, it's a lag system. So if you run a sixth form, you can take on extra young people, but you won't get funded to the following year. That needs to change. There'll be a cash flow issue.
Yeah.
And if you're going to take on new teachers to cope and new lecturers to cope with these new students, then you need to be assurances that you'll be funded in that month.
Okay.
And also, I believe that this new programme needs to be intensive. Yeah. It needs not to be, 15 hours maybe, with a bit of work experience. The work experience is not going to be there. It needs to be 21 to 25 hours of intensive activity, with simulated work experience, and that needs to be paid for. And the present funded mechanisms are not good enough.
Yeah, well, I think most people in the sector would absolutely concur with that in terms of how we spend money following the learner in the system. Now, David, NCFE is a big player already in the T-level market, which is obviously a new qualification planned to start this September. I mean, how do you see your awarding organisation and the industry more broadly impacted then by coronavirus?
So I suppose as context to that, the pace of the economic change and the labour market changes that we are going to see as we start to come out of lockdown and some of the short-term measures that government have put in place, the pace of that change, I think, is going to be like nothing that we've seen in the modern era. So to Susan's point about not having time to lose and needing some rapid responses, it is absolutely needed. And for me, it's a whole systems response, at every level, from policy to programmatic decisions, to funding decisions, to individual institutions, organisations, and right down at the delivery level. We need to think very quickly, move fast with these responses, but they also need to be well thought through and learn from what has worked in the past. So as an awarding organisation within all of that, we do have some good evidence as to what works in terms of educational outcomes, in terms of progression, in terms of impact, and even in terms of some value for money measures. And all of that, I think, needs throwing into the mix to inform some of these short-term responses. And as an awarding organisation, we're thinking about, this isn't necessarily just the production of some new qualifications or new content. It's how do we enable the whole system to respond quickly? Does there need to be a CPD offer? Does there need to be a content offer? Which qualifications, which programmes? So there's a lot of enabling activity that we're looking at as an awarding organisation to help the sector to respond rapidly.
Okay. I thought it was really interesting when I caught up with the Skills Minister for England, Gillian Keegan, on last night's show, and I put obviously the decline in starts, which began actually before the lockdown came in terms of the apprenticeship market. And I thought it was really interesting. She said to me that she wasn't really concerned about numbers before coronavirus, but now she really is, not least because what do we know about any kind of economic downturn or a recession? Employers not only don't hire so many apprentices, but they tend to let go of the ones they've got. I mean, Susan, when you were talking about the new offer, what would you like to see the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education with government and Treasury look to perhaps introduce, so that we really don't see those apprenticeship numbers, which are already have been declining with standards, just completely fall off a cliff?
Yeah, I mean, it was an issue before COVID-19, and now it's a bigger issue. And the problem we've got with the apprenticeship programme, the levy's been brilliant, and to give government they do, there's been more focus on apprenticeships in the last 5 years than it has in the last sort of 20. So in a way, it's a really good programme. But one of the things that's happened is that there's been a sort of mission drift. So more funding now goes into the sort of postgraduate apprenticeship than it then goes into the young person trying to get their first foot on a career ladder for apprenticeships. And we were losing the sort of lower tier infrastructure. And I know there's always an issue, and people think, oh, well, if it's, only level 2, then it's going to be low quality. But that's not the case. And I think what COVID-19 has done is make people realise that we do need to invest in care workers. We do need to have a level 2 in place for a care worker, and we do need to pay it properly. And we do need level 2s in business admin, and we do need to pay for it properly. We do need level 2s in plumbing and in plastering. We need a level 2, a progression route for all those trades. And the young people that would traditionally go on those qualifications and programmes were young people who may not have got, they 5 GCSEs in new language, 5 and above. These would have been young people that would have been struggling to get a group of GCSEs, but very capable and would have learned really good skills at that lower level.
Okay.
So I wrote something back in February, long before COVID-19, suggesting that we needed to make sure that there was an offer, that was a progression route, there was a good offer at that level 2 level. And I'd like to see that reinstated. And I also like to think that, those who felt that level 2 was not a good spend, a good use of public money, now realise, through all the work that care workers do, and the lorry drivers and the delivery people and everybody that's making our life possible, that actually that they should be invested in more, maybe, than those who've already done well out of the system.
Well, indeed. Well, when you look at that COBRA list of critical occupations, I think it's been a wake-up call, isn't it, for the whole definition of a key worker in our economy. David, I mean, just on the apprenticeship challenge then, I suspect colleagues at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education really are, going back to first base to some extent to think about, the impending challenge around the numbers, but also the scope of the programme. As Susan was indicating there, it is a programme over recent years that's tended to favour, certainly when you've looked at growth in the higher levels, and it also is an all-age programme. Now I know, Susan, you would support that because you're as passionate about adults as you are about young people. But David, do you think,
absolutely,
do you think some kind of recalibration of the programme itself, combined with perhaps some reinvention of the apprenticeship levy, is on the cards?
I think that's absolutely right, Tom. And you've used the word that we've often spoken about at NCFE. It is about a recalibration to begin with.
Yeah.
That whilst I'm a huge supporter of apprenticeships at all levels and at all ages, right at the core and to the spirit of the apprenticeship programme, for me, it's about early careers and those first steps into whether that's your first occupation or transitioning from one occupation to another, through a career change, or actually, possibly somebody who's maybe been out of work for a long time that needs an employment opportunity with training to develop a career. So I do think, all age and at the various levels, but with a very strong calibration back to those who need the support of the system the most. And to the point about flexibility, I think absolutely, to my mind at least, we've gone so far into trying to shoehorn everything into an apprenticeship so that the levy can support it, that some programmes, in my view, in our view, do not lend themselves to being an apprenticeship programme. If we do have those rigid design principles of 12 months plus a day, 20% off the job, for a single occupation, rather than maybe thinking about multi-skilling. If they are the constraints of the system as is, I think we need to look at those constraints or look at some further flexibilities in terms of how the funding can support things that are not apprenticeships.
Yeah.
And I suppose the final point on that for me is that we are going to see a downturn in employment numbers, a significant downturn in employment numbers, which naturally, not naturally, but I think a very sad consequence of that is that we will see lots of young people outside of the labour market. So what are more of the programme-led approaches that might support us in the intervening period as we, reboot the economy and also reboot the apprenticeships with that sort of fine-tuned calibration?
Sure.
There's a lot we can learn about what has been successful about the apprenticeship programme, but I'm sure there's, lots that could be improved as well.
We can. I mean, we can certainly learn from previous recessions too. I mean, I think there are all of us on the line here would remember things like the 1980s, the youth training scheme, mass unemployment. Sometimes we got these programs right, other times we didn't. Susan, in terms of adults, I mean, you're a passionate campaigner on behalf of adult and community education. I mean, that must keep you awake at night, the thought of millions of adults on the dole queue.
It does keep you awake at night. It's a real issue, and they're all interlinked. If we could do better with our young people, then we wouldn't have so many adults with poor literacy and numeracy. And if we, so it is all interlinked. And if we could actually restate that first rung on the ladder, there are many adults, the 19 plus, who would love to be on a level 2 apprenticeship. And because of the numbers, the unemployed numbers, which are going up daily, and, I live very close to Gatwick Airport, and every day, there's another 1,000 people losing their jobs. It's devastating in an area like this, because that those types of skills that they've got are not going to be duplicated in another industry. So they're going to need to retrain. So we've got a whole set of adults with a whole set of different issues. We still got the basic skilled adult, the adult with poor literacy and numeracy. Yeah. They went into the into the job market the last couple of years, but they've been in very low skilled jobs, often low paid and often on zero-based contract. We still need to do something for them. They will be the last to be employed again. Then we need to do something about adults who need to be retrained, and maybe they only need a 12-week intensive bit of activity, but colleges and adult training centres need to be funded properly, and now. They need to be planning now for those people, not having them sitting around, and getting really demoralised. And the problem we've got is universal credit was set up in a time when unemployment was low. And there are still very, very difficult barriers sitting in universal credit for somebody who wants to do some training. And if you're an employed person, you want money. So there needs to be an incentive, instead of going for a low-paid job, it would be really good if people could go on training and then get the equivalent of a maintenance award to do that.
Sure.
And we need a maintenance awards, not just for those going off to university to do a foundation level. We want maintenance awards for everybody that is post-19.
As ever, full of very practical and pragmatic policy ideas. David, the last word to you. I mean, you just teamed up, this NCFE has teamed up with the Campaign for Learning, which is a great stalwart and influencing body in our skills system. If there's sort of one thing then that you would like to see ministers adopt as part of preparing for the new normal, what's your takeaway for tonight's listeners?
So I'll answer that, I suppose, in a little bit of an abstract way, Tom, if that's all right. And,
all right.
Because I think
take
a lot
all
of
comers on this show. Abstract or practical.
The practical steps really comes through for me very loud and clear in the no time to lose paper.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's all sorts of great things out there from City and Guilds, from AOC, and a number of others. Edge Foundation. There's some really good practical things. So my sort of abstract answer to that, if you like, is we as a sector, we as an education system need to be more shock-proof. And just as this pandemic hit, it reminded me initially, bizarrely, of earthquakes hitting Japan, and how the Japanese building infrastructure is now shock-proof. So you see these huge magnitude earthquakes hitting Japan, and the damage is largely superficial a lot of the time because they are built ready for those shocks to come. And I think, unfortunately, within our education system at the moment, the fact that we've had to stand down exams in such a large way, the fact that we're having to adopt radical new frameworks in a very short space of time, which inevitably will have wrinkles in them, demonstrates to me that we are not yet shock-proof. And I think given the volatile and unpredictable world that we live in, we really need to think deeply about how we are more prepared for the next shock when it comes. How do we make ourselves more resilient, more adaptable, more shock-proof? And that's at all levels of the system, right down to individual learners themselves. How do we help young people or adult learners or everyone in between to build the resilience, the adaptability, the emotional intelligence to deal with shocks? Because I think the world that we're in, they are inevitable. Now, what that means in practical terms, as I say, there's lots of great stuff out there. For me, we then need to synthesize that and come up with a real vision for education, a strategic plan that galvanizes the whole set together. And hopefully that's one of the really positive consequences. I'm already seeing a lot of positive galvanization of organizations and relationships working together more collaboratively. So that would be my word. How do we prepare for the inevitable future shocks and come through in a much better state?
Well, I don't think that was abstract at all. I think that was a pretty clear message around saying whatever the future holds, we really have, as a society and an economy, got to plan more for resilience. Look, pleasure to have you both on the show. Thanks for coming and debating that theme with listeners this evening and myself. Great to talk to you. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye-bye. Bye.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. So after this brief musical break, I'll be getting our final sector leader viewpoint on tonight's big debate. What does the future hold? What is the new normal? And I'll be talking to Paul Eeles, who's the Group CEO of the Skills and Education Group. But in my world, he is the chairman of the Federation of Awarding Bodies. Coming up after this track. That's Halman, and a track called Honesty. I think we've had Halman on the show before as well. So in our final segment of the show, it's absolute pleasure and a delight to introduce Paul Eeles. Paul, you on the phone?
Good evening, Tom.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Now, I think you've had a chance, haven't you, to listen to our other guests this evening. But let's start with your day job role. I mean, how's the pandemic then affected your awarding body, Skills and Education Group?
Well, the Skills and Education Group Awards is just one part of the group. Yeah. We've got 2 awarding bodies and a membership organisation for colleges and providers providing professional development. So it's been a whirlwind of 7-8 weeks. It's 8 weeks today since I was last in my office. Right. It feels like every day has been a very different day. I'm actually sat about 10 feet from my bedroom, and I haven't moved really from that spot for the last 8 weeks. And as other guests you've had on have been talking about the challenges that you've had, getting used to new technology, but basically making sure that we are ensuring that we're supporting our members, our learners, and our staff, and the decisions that we've had to make around running the business, ensuring that the staff are safe, ensuring that we're still delivering our services to learners and to our members' staff, has been top of our priority.
Indeed, it has. And I mean, I think I saw somewhere actually that you're a big lead, within your organisation on sort of mental health issues as well. I mean, has that sort of reared its head in this process of furloughing staff and, as you say, 7 weeks since you're back in your office?
Yeah, it has. It's been a real challenge. I think I became quite aware about 3 weeks before all this started. I went on a mental health first aid course, and that has been part of the forefront of my mind about actually how do we support staff, how do we support our colleagues that we come into contact with every day. David Hughes' article in TES, I think, was very telling and really refreshing that somebody has been as honest as David, because actually I don't think I could have. I was going to work in the first few days, not even thinking about the types of decisions I would be making by the end of the day, because the pace at which we've been moving and working has been phenomenal, making decisions in minutes and hours that you would have taken weeks and months to have decided prior to COVID-19. Indeed,
yeah. I mean, like every day just feels like a sort of tsunami of the unpredictable.
It does.
It's a kind of tyranny of the urgent, I call it, actually, with the team at Fab. Now, look, you work with also a lot of colleges. I mean, you do in your Fab role, but at SEG as well, you're a membership organisation. I mean, how do you see those colleges impacted then from this September?
I mean, it's really interesting because we've taken our professional development offer online through Zoom primarily, and our numbers have shot through the roof. We're getting hundreds of people signing up for our sessions, and I think people are hungry for information about what we're going to do. Tonight's show is entitled "How Do We Prepare for September's New Norm?" I'm assuming you're talking September 2021.
Well,
I'm not sure.
When does the new norm kick in? When does it end? That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that we're in a period that now says it's. At the moment, I've been likening it to flying a jumbo jet. Yeah. I'm captaining a jumbo jet that is in the worst possible storm you could possibly have ever come across. The radar's been kicked out and you can't see out of the window, and you've got to land this plane on what you think is a runway below you, but you're not really sure what the quality of the runway is when you get there. And I think that's what many organisation leaders and staff are actually going to be working with, whether you're an awarding body, whether you're a membership body, whether you're a college, a provider, whoever you are, trying to land in September and actually continue the kind of service that we're going to provide our learners and our employers that we all serve.
Yeah, as you say, very vivid metaphor there of landing a jumbo jet on a postage stamp without any radar. I think a lot of people listening to this will really associate themselves with that. Now, look, let's talk about your other job as chair of the Federation of Awarding Bodies, and you work obviously closely with me. And together we've been working with policymakers since the crisis began and before, but with members, with regulators over these past few weeks. I mean, we've had a bit of a ringside seat, haven't we, on the unfolding crisis from both a governmental but also an awarding industry perspective. What do you see, though, as the key issues for the awarding industry as we go forward?
I think the key issue right now is about the ability to communicate with our centres and our learners at pace. The need to make decisions at pace is a real challenge. Getting people to understand the differences of the types of qualifications. Certainly from a learner perspective, we've got lots of centres that are closed and are not actually connecting with their learners, and learners are now phoning us, and I know that that's happening with other awarding bodies. So I think the challenge is around getting communication and getting it right. I think there's some really good examples. I think there's some good examples in my own team, and I think there's, from what I see around the sector, some really great examples. From our ringside seat, I think the relationship that we've got with the regulators as FAB has been really good and really effective. I know we've got some key meetings coming up tomorrow around actually ensuring key communication with the key membership bodies and Ofqual, which Ofqual have called for. And I think the relationships are really good. I don't doubt that anybody's working incredibly hard, but these are some really complex issues to work through. I don't think there are simplistic answers, and I think taking learners and taking centres with us on this journey over the next few weeks is going to be a real challenge.
Yeah. Just final question for you then. I mean, as you say, a relationship with Ofqual and indeed with other regulators is very productive, between the sector and those regulators, which, as you quite rightly say, I mean, they've also lost their weekends and are working ridiculous hours every day, as indeed everybody is across the skills system at the moment. But in terms of this extraordinary regulatory framework that they've brought in, I mean, it inevitably has caused some issues, hasn't it? Because effectively, certainly for a period of time, there's almost like double regulation going on. You've got the existing common standards of recognition, which of course all AOs, niche or mass market players, have to subscribe to, and now we've got this, albeit temporary, framework that's coming in as well. I mean, obviously I understand the motivations behind it. No one wants to see learners disadvantaged, either general qualifications or vocational qualifications, but it is a huge resource load, isn't it, on the sector? And I mean, AOs like yours as charity are not arms of the state, but it's obviously having a huge impact on them all.
Yeah, it is having a massive impact. I think it was absolutely necessary to bring in something like this emergency framework. I just hope that the framework isn't something that is here forever. We've had assurances that it's not. But I think it has absolutely had an impact. Most AOs, or as a lot of AOs, have furloughed a large proportion of their staff. We have. That's meant my team have worked incredibly hard, as you say, in very short order. The things that we've been asked of us have been, you would ordinarily have been asked for that stuff in weeks and not
absolutely
4 days.
Yeah.
So I think yes, we have been working incredibly hard, but the one thing that hallmarks the FE and skills sector, whatever part of it is, the staff work incredibly hard and do deliver. And I don't think we can fault our staff in any way in any part of the sector at the minute for the hard work that is being put into making this all work for learners.
Great. Paul, it's a really positive note to end. The last contributor and the FAB chairman and also chief executive of Skills and Education Group. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Tom.
Brilliant to talk to you. So that was Paul Eeles there. Now, tomorrow will be our 10th anniversary. Well, 10th episode anyway. To mark this important Skills World Live milestone, we'll be asking the question, how will COVID-19 widen the disadvantage and attainment gap? We've got a great lineup of sector experts to debate that topic, including the boss of the BAME Apprenticeship Alliance. track called Purple Lilies. It's by Some Wave. Nice, calming, relaxing way to end the show. Now, don't forget that if you want to be on the show, just contact us at skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. You can also call us on the Skype phone. That's 02032 900 111. And of course, one of the wonderful Skills World Live team will get back to you. Thanks as ever to the show's editor, Kelly O'Mara, and our wonderful digital producer, Ellie Hansen. Skills World Live is an FE News production, supported by the Federation of Awarding Bodies Platinum Partners Programme. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News.